What happens when the world's second largest economy, responsible for nearly 15% of global trade, suddenly cuts the flow of capital and demand? Factories go quiet. Supply chains break. Unemployment surges. Entire industries collapse in sequence. Now zoom in on the United States. What if China, one of America's biggest customers and lenders, stopped buying altogether? This isn't some distant what if. It's a real, rapidly unfolding scenario. And the fallout could reshape not just US markets, but the global economy itself. So here's the question. What would happen if China fully decouples from the United States? Let's start by visualizing the magnitude of such a collapse. China is the third largest importer of US goods, purchasing nearly $150 billion worth of American exports annually. If this flow halts, the immediate impact would be catastrophic. Industries reliant on Chinese demand, like agriculture, aerospace, and technology, would face layoffs in the millions. Economist Dr. Caroline Freund describes this scenario as a chain reaction. She warns, when a major buyer exits, supply chains buckle. From soybean farmers to semiconductor manufacturers, the fallout could spark a nationwide recession. The most visible impact? Unemployment. Projections from the Peterson Institute estimate job losses could surpass 2 million within a year, with GDP contracting by 1 to 2% annually. Take John Peterson, a farmer in Nebraska. We've invested heavily to meet China's demands. Without their market, we're sitting on surplus crops and mounting debt. This personal struggle reflects the broader vulnerability across rural economies. And yet, China's motivations reveal a deeper story. Trade between the US and China once symbolized economic symbiosis, but the past decade's tensions, from the Trump administration's tariffs to Biden's semiconductor export bans, have drastically shifted this dynamic. A 2024 report by the US-China Business Council highlights that bilateral trade fell by over 15% between 2018 and 2023. The report attributes this decline to mutual tariffs, supply chain diversification, and escalating political hostility. Still, the numbers don't lie. China remains America's third largest trading partner. Losing this relationship entirely could amplify vulnerabilities in industries already weakened by global competition and technological disruption. Could this strategy lead to a more fragmented world economy? Let's explore further. China's strategy isn't just a reaction to tariffs or trade wars. It's rooted in long-term planning. President Xi Jinping's policy of dual circulation aims to reduce dependency on foreign markets while bolstering domestic consumption and production. Take the agricultural sector as an example. Over the past decade, China has invested billions in agricultural partnerships across Brazil, Argentina, and Africa. By diversifying its suppliers, Beijing ensures food security without relying on US soybeans or corn. Experts like Dr. Yao Yang of Peking University explain, China's ultimate goal is self-reliance in food, energy, and technology. This strategy insulates the nation from geopolitical risks. For the US, this shift signals not just a loss of revenue, but a diminishing influence on global supply chains. Could another nation step in to fill this void? China isn't simply cutting imports, it's replacing them. Nations like Brazil, India, and Australia are stepping into roles previously dominated by the US. Take soybeans, for example. Brazil now supplies over 60% of China's soybean imports, a market that once heavily favored American farmers. Similarly, Australian firms have capitalized on China's appetite for coal and iron ore, filling gaps left by US exporters. According to Bloomberg's recent analysis, these shifts aren't temporary, they're structural. Countries benefiting from this pivot are also joining China's larger trade initiatives, further embedding themselves into its economic orbit. So, what does this mean for global supply chains? Let's dig deeper. Some industries are more exposed than others. Agriculture tops the list. In 2022, China accounted for 58% of US soybean exports. Now, that number is steadily declining. Semiconductors also face significant risks. While U.S. firms like Qualcomm and Intel remain essential suppliers, China's aggressive investment in domestic chipmaking poses a long-term threat. Finally, aerospace manufacturers like Boeing are feeling the heat. Orders from China have slowed dramatically as Beijing turns to European alternatives like Airbus. According to Reuters, Boeing's China sales dropped by 27% in 2023 alone. How will these industries reshape themselves to remain viable? Let's continue. American farmers have been the proverbial canary in the coal mine. Reduced Chinese demand for soybeans, pork, and corn has led to plummeting prices and widespread bankruptcies. The U.S. Department of Agriculture reported that farm incomes declined by 18% in 2023. States like Iowa and Illinois, heavily reliant on exports to China, have seen rural economies shrink dramatically. Take a look at this chart. What would it take for U.S. farmers to find alternative buyers or diversify their crops? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Supply chains are in flux. China's decoupling efforts, spurred by both political and economic factors, are creating regional hubs that bypass the U.S. Countries like Vietnam and India are emerging as manufacturing alternatives. However, these shifts aren't painless. A 2024 McKinsey report warns, relocating supply chains will cost global firms $1 trillion over the next decade. For U.S. exporters, these changes translate to lost revenue and increased competition from lower-cost producers. Can American industries adapt quickly enough to survive? The geopolitical stakes are immense. As China reduces dependence on U.S. goods, it gains leverage in trade negotiations and geopolitical conflicts. Consider the Taiwan Strait crisis of 2024. China's ability to weather sanctions without significant economic harm underscored its self-reliance. This shift forces the U.S. to reassess its strategies, balancing economic interests with broader geopolitical goals. Could this mark a turning point in U.S.-China relations? Semiconductors, the building blocks of modern technology, are at the center of U.S.-China tensions. While the U.S. leads in innovation, China is closing the gap with aggressive investments. By 2024, China's domestic semiconductor output increased by 18%, thanks to initiatives like the National Integrated Circuit Plan. This threatens U.S. firms that rely on Chinese markets for revenue. The consequences? A potential decoupling of tech ecosystems, forcing American companies to navigate a fragmented global market. How will this impact the global tech landscape? China's focus on the global south, Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia has created a new axis of trade. Through initiatives like the China-Africa Cooperation Forum, Beijing is solidifying ties with emerging markets. In 2023 alone, trade between China and Africa grew by 14%, surpassing $300 billion. This shift reduces reliance on traditional Western markets, including the U.S. For America, this means not only losing market share, but also influence in regions once considered strategic allies. How can the U.S. reestablish itself as a competitive partner? Launched in 2013, China's Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI, has fundamentally altered global trade. With investments exceeding $1 trillion, the BRI connects Asia, Africa, and Europe via new ports, railways, and highways. These routes minimize reliance on U.S.-controlled trade corridors. A striking example is the China-Europe Railway Express, which saw a 16% increase in shipments in 2023. By diversifying logistics, China ensures smoother access to markets without U.S. interference. The implications for American exporters are stark. Losing access to Chinese ports could mean longer, costlier supply chains, further eroding their competitive edge. Are U.S. industries ready to adapt? China's pivot away from U.S. goods coincides with its ascension as a leader in green technology. From solar panels to EV batteries, China now dominates markets critical to the energy transition. In 2023, China accounted for over 70% of global EV battery production. American companies like Tesla remain dependent on Chinese suppliers, creating an ironic imbalance. Dr. Fatih Birol, head of the International Energy Agency, noted, China's dominance in green tech isn't just about economics. It's about geopolitical leverage. How does the US compete in this rapidly evolving market? The rise of multipolarity challenges America's dominance in global trade. Institutions like BRICS are gaining traction, offering alternatives to US-led systems like the WTO. While the US remains a key player, maintaining influence will require adapting to a world where China and other powers hold equal sway. Is the US ready to share the stage? China's investments in renewable energy, from wind turbines to hydrogen, have solidified its role as a leader in the green energy revolution. By 2024, China controlled 40% of global renewable energy patents. This dominance creates both opportunities and risks for global markets, particularly for countries like the US that lag in green innovation. Could China's leadership pave the way for a greener world, or will it further polarize global energy markets? China's trade alliances, spanning Asia, Africa, and beyond, are reshaping the global order. Agreements like the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, exclude the US, highlighting its declining influence. As China consolidates these partnerships, the global economy tilts further toward a China-centric model, challenging the dollar's dominance and the West's economic leadership. Are we witnessing the dawn of a new global order? China's strategic decoupling from the US isn't an isolated event. It's a harbinger of a broader transformation in global trade. As the world shifts toward multipolarity, America faces a daunting question. Can it adapt to this new reality, or will it lose its economic edge? We're glad you're enjoying this video. Please like and subscribe. Check out another video that is now on your screen.